Are there legitimate sleeper teams in the SEC? Because we've got a very, very unique situation down there. What qualifies as a sleeper? So, right now, if you look over at FanDuel, they have 7 teams in this conference with a win total, over under win total of 9.5 or higher. So, that's Georgia, Texas, Bama, LSU, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee. And then you got a second layer of A&M and Oklahoma and Auburn and so on and so forth. So, obviously, if Alabama wins the conference, they're not a sleeper. LSU is not a sleeper to win the conference. Missouri, to me, even though they've got the exact same win total as those teams, this is different because my criteria for being a sleeper team is if you win the conference, is the college football public going to be surprised? And I don't care that their over-under win total is 9.5. You know good and well, if you live in Salina, Kansas, or if you live in Olympia, Washington, you're just a college football fan, but you don't really follow these teams in the South intimately, you know good and well if Missouri wins the SEC, it's going to make you say, whoa, wow. Bama wouldn't do that to you. LSU probably would not do that to you because you've seen them do it before. You hadn't seen Missouri do it before. 11th in S&P Plus entering the season. They are 17th in returning production. Got a really good quarterback wide receiver combo. Brady Cook comes back. Luther Burden. They held on to him, and he's going to be a focal point of their offense and one of the best pass catchers in America. And also, I think they backfilled at running back really, really nicely. And I also think they backfilled defensively on their coaching staff really nicely. Boston College is on their schedule, new coaching staff there. A&M, new coaching staff. Mississippi State, new staff. Bama, new staff. They only face one team with a preseason win total of 9.5 or higher, and that's Alabama. They don't face Texas. They don't face Georgia. So you want to label a sleeper, even though they won 11 games, I think it was last year. I still think Missouri's a sleeper because if they won the thing, it would take people by surprise. And another one, which I get accused of going to the well of every year, but I'm going to do it again, is Kentucky. Kentucky's probably got a little bit higher ceiling than they normally do. Like normally, Kentucky's floating in that 6 to 6.5 over-under win range, but the ceiling is 7 or 8. It's what it feels like. And maybe it is again. I feel like the ceiling is a tick higher, and it's because of the experience they return. All of this is contingent on Brock Vandagriff being a B-plus or better caliber quarterback. And they got him out of Georgia via the transfer portal. They returned 4 offensive linemen with 15-plus starts. Every starter on this offensive line will be an upperclassman. They lost 0 starts on the defensive line. So I'm just going to stop there for a second because I got a lot of folks who hop in the comment section. I got a lot of folks who hop in the replies and they say, well, this is a line of scrimmage game. This is a line of scrimmage league. And you're right. And I just quoted both sides of the ball, some very interesting numbers there, some very interesting factoids, and yet that same group will try and dismiss it because it's Kentucky. You don't have to do it just because it's Kentucky. They got a couple of safeties with 20-plus starts. Corner, I think, is a little bigger question for them, but they got back-to-back top 25 portal classes there, and 3 of their last 5 recruiting classes have been in the top 25. If Brock Vandagriff plays above average or better football for them, elsewhere, they've got a lot of the questions they would normally have already answered before we have to deal with injury, and no one predicts injury and no one can forecast that. There is, by the way, in the SEC, before I move on, there's a kind of dream scenario that could also be a nightmare scenario. So I think if you're Greg Sankey or the league office or whatever, your dream scenario would be, all right, let's have all these teams with the over-under win totals of 9.5 or better, all of them play at that level. And then a Texas A&M or an Auburn or an Oklahoma or a Kentucky, couple of those teams pop as well. They all play at or above the caliber that Vegas expects them to. Well, that sounds great, could be a problem because not all of them can win the games. So like for every conference game, you got to have a winner and a loser. So it could be a situation where because you have so many good teams, you got someone playing 10-win caliber ball that ends up 8-4. Now, as long as a few teams separate, that's not a problem for you when it comes playoff committee selection time. But what if it totally cannibalizes itself? What if your conference cannibalizes itself and the best you've got is you got a 10-2 or an 11-2 conference champ that emerges, and then they deal their opponent their third loss, and you just got a bunch of 3 and 4 loss just jumbled up mess as your conference standings, and the committee decides to go full on, you are what your record says you are mode. I don't think that'll happen, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Because if Georgia's defensive line or Texas's defensive line do not elevate those teams to elite, the rest of that group there probably does not have high-level elite potential this year. The high end for an Alabama or an Ole Miss or an LSU to me is really, really good. That's my feel on those teams. Georgia and Texas probably have top-end elite capability, but if they don't pan out on the defensive line, there's not an elite team, an unbeatable team, in other words, on that list, and you could have total, utter carnage in the SEC, and then you've got the committee with a real dilemma on their hands. How do we interpret 9-3 in the SEC? Certainly, how do you interpret 8-4? You're not putting a 4-loss team in the playoff. They lost a third of their games. They're not going. You are what your record says you are, after all. So we'll deal with that when the time comes, and time probably won't come, but it could. It could.